24mm, a lens that has really grown on me over time as a photographer who shoots lifestyle, portrait, and travel photography. It's actually a very popular lens, not because people specifically go out to buy a 24mm prime lens, but because you might be holding one in your hand right now. Yep, if you've got an iPhone, then you have shot on a 24mm prime lens. Well, it's actually 26mm, but it's close enough. The Sigma 24mm 1.4 DG-DN is an updated design specifically for mirrorless cameras. They did have an older 24mm 1.4, but that was actually adapted from a lens that was designed for the DSLR. Their autofocus accuracy wasn't quite as good, and because they had to extend that barrel to make up for the shorter flange distance of the mirrorless camera, they're a little bit larger and heavier than they needed to be. So if you are searching for a 24mm prime lens for your Sony E-mount camera, make sure you are looking at this latest updated design because they have improved this lens in almost every single way. Let's start by talking about the sharpness of the 24mm 1.4. I actually owned the DSLR version of this lens for many years, and I absolutely love the sharpness and quality that I was getting, and this lens is just on another level. It is razor sharp from corner to corner. I really can't fault this lens for its sharpness, even wide open at 1.4. Previous version of the Sigma 24 already exceeded all of my expectations in terms of sharpness. I'm not really the kind of person who needs a clinically sharp lens, but if you are, you definitely won't be disappointed. Unless you want a greater depth of field, there's no real need to stop this lens down to increase the sharpness. So bokeh is something that I've really come to appreciate in my style of photography. I do really love a buttery and smooth background, and with the 1.4 aperture, you're definitely getting that with this lens. Here in these test photos, you can see how smooth these out of focus areas are. I think that the pairing between that 1.4 aperture and the wide field of view of 24mm is what really makes this lens very interesting. You see these dreamy out of focus backgrounds all the time, but it's more common that you see them on a 50mm or an 85mm, something a little bit more zoomed in. But to see that blurry background with a very encompassing wide field of view is a little less common. And for that reason, it makes me really excited to go out and shoot with a 24mm 1.4 to see what kind of unique perspectives that I can come away with. A big concern with a lot of people when they're looking at a lens that is a different brand from the camera body that they're shooting on is how accurate is the focus going to be. And I did a few tests where I had Leon walk towards the camera. I fired off a bunch of shots in continuous, and I had really good results with the focus accuracy. I'm not the biggest fan of these focus accuracy tests. I'd rather just use the lens in the real world and then go through my photos, pick the ones that I like, and see how many of them are actually in focus. So checking through the RAWs here in narrative select, hardly any of them are giving me a rating less than 8. 7 is good focus, and anything below that would be considered out of focus. And if you're wondering what this app is, it's actually a free app that allows you to import thousands of photos in a couple of seconds. You can see cropped in previews to decide which photos are in focus, and it even tells you when your subjects are blinking or mid-blink, and if you choose, you can automatically filter these photos out along with all of the out of focus ones. It's surprisingly accurate, and it saved me hours of time culling down my photos. When you're done selecting, you just hit the ship button, and only these selected photos get automatically pulled into your Lightroom catalog, saving you tons of time waiting for those previews to load in Lightroom. And let's be honest, Lightroom can be a bit slow. Plus, your Lightroom catalog is so much slimmer once you throw out all those junk photos before you start. If you want to get narrative, it is completely free for up to 6 projects a month. I've left a link down in the description below to get started. Chromatic aberration is those pink and green fringes that you can sometimes see on really high contrasty areas, especially when you're shooting wide open. On the Sigma 24, they are very well controlled. This lens and the 24 in general is going to be a really great focal length for video shooters. You can put it on a gimbal or run and gun handheld, and you're going to get great results. The lens does suffer from focus breathing. On the A7IV, you actually have a feature that eliminates focus breathing, but unfortunately, it's only available for Sony branded lenses. So with the Sigma lens, you will need to keep that in mind, that there is little focus breathing. In the real world, doesn't matter. yes, if you're going to be doing large focus racks from something that's very close to the camera and then racking focus to the distance. But for me, I tend not to do those focus racks on such a wide angle lens. I would probably stick to a 50 or an 85 to do those kind of shots. That's just me. I don't really like the look of racking focus on such a wide focal length, but good to keep in mind if you do. Onto vignetting now. Vignetting performance is pretty good. It doesn't have a crazy amount of vignetting, and oftentimes we don't even see this effect because a lot of cameras have built-in profiles to remove it. And also when you import the photos into Lightroom, it'll automatically remove it as well with a profile correction. Because I was actually lucky enough to get this lens before it was released, there is no Lightroom profile for automatic corrections yet. The good thing is the profile from the previous version of the Sigma 24mm tended to do a pretty good job with fixing up those darkened corners. For the video shooters, however, you will see the vignetting effect in your footage, so do keep that in mind. This lens is quite a lot smaller and a little bit lighter than the previous version, coming in at 520 grams. To put that in perspective, the original Sigma Art for the E-mount was 665 grams and 90 millimeters long. So that's actually a big advantage for this new design. The filter thread is 72 millimeters versus the 77 of the older version. So if you are upgrading, you will probably need to get a step-up ring for all your filters. It's weather sealed as well. It's got the anti-moisture gasket at the mount, as well as weather sealing throughout the barrel of the lens. Its build quality is definitely a step up from the Art lenses of previous years. Some notable features of the design itself are that they've added a focus lock switch on the body of the lens. This means you can switch the camera into manual focus and then flick this extra lock switch. This will then mean that accidentally bumping the focus ring will not put the lens out of focus. And this is really handy for video shooters, filming interviews, and setups where the focus needs to be set and not changed throughout the shot. It's also great for astrophotography because when you're out using the lens in the dark, it's often really hard to acquire focus in the first place, and then any small movement bumping the lens could ruin your focus. The lens has a click and declick aperture selector and also a lock on that aperture ring, which means that accidentally changing the aperture by bumping the lens is a thing of the past. And finally, we have an assignable custom button on the lens barrel. The new 24mm has the option to utilize rear filters too, similar to the 14 to 24 2.8 lens they released a few years back. Let's talk about price now. This lens is going to retail at $799 USD, which is almost half of the price of the 24mm 1.4 G Master from Sony. Now, I have not compared the two, but for the quality that you're getting out of this lens and for $799, it's going to be really hard to beat in terms of value for money. So do I like the 24mm 1.4? Definitely yes. Will I be buying one? Yes, as soon as I can get my hands on one, I will be picking this lens up. Unfortunately, this particular one has to go back to Sigma, but thank you so much to Sigma Photo Australia for sending this one out and letting me test it out for you guys. Make sure you leave a like down below if this video helped you out in any way, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one.